All right, welcome to the Recovery Bros podcast. It's a weekly YouTube show with myself, Adam Sudd, and Doug Bopst, two guys in recovery. We have real world conversations, recovery strategy, talk about addiction and mental health science, and real world reps that you can use in your own life. What's up, Doug? What are we talking about today?
What's up, Adam? I want to talk about Hunter Biden. And the reason I want to talk about him is he's making this comeback. He's back on X and just kind of getting after it and sharing his side of the story. And, I originally, obviously, I'm very familiar with Hunter and his story. And like a lot of people, you kind of at first, wanted to dislike him based on some of the external that you saw. And then I heard him on Sean Ryan's podcast. And I was like, man, like, I like this guy. Like, I don't necessarily maybe agree with his politics or his family's politics. But that being said, like, I like this guy. Like, I like that he's out sharing his story. And then the same thing happened on Candace Owens' podcast where I was like, okay, let's see. Like, here, it was kind of the same thing. I really liked what he had to say. And I'll punt it back to you in a minute. But first, I wanted to say that I think he was in a really tough position. I think that, A, the photos that came out with the laptop and the crack pipe and all that stuff, it's like, he was an addict going through addiction. And I think he got exploited for political reasons. And I know for me personally, that some of the stuff that I did in the depths of my addiction, I would be so upset if they were plastered all over the internet. And I think, based on what was going on in his life at the time with, you know, his dad running for president, the reelection, like all the political stuff around it. And then also what was going on the other side of the political party. Like he wasn't necessarily, it wasn't in his best interest to speak out because and he was going through all the legal trouble too. And so I just found it kind of enlightening to like pay attention to a guy that I don't necessarily agree with everything he has to say, but as a former addict myself, there's a lot of relatability there, and I give him mad respect for what he's doing.
You know, it's interesting that you bring this up. I'm on the advisory board to the Matthew Perry Foundation, and we had, which is a foundation for addiction recovery. And we had a summit last year, and Hunter Biden was one of the keynote speakers. And they kept it a secret until the day of, so I had no idea that this was going to happen. Like, I'll be honest, like I had my preconceived bias about this guy, like this idea that, like, oh, here's this, political, quote unquote political figure caught in all this scandal, caught in all these lies. Like, he's the son of a president who's seemingly taking advantage of his position to get himself enriched or to get away with bad behavior. And at the same time, like I had all these preconceived ideas. Like I just disliked the guy. And at the same time, I also saw the addict side of him. And I saw this part of him that was like extremely, overwhelmed, clearly in the depths of his addiction, clearly fighting this thing that he could not fight against it well, going, dude, I'd probably be as miserably dislikable as he was if I were the worst of my addiction at the same time that my dad, if he were president, right? And I was the son of the president when my addiction was at worst, I'd be exploiting that leverage left, right, and center to get my needs met. And so there's a part of me that's like, maybe I'm being really unfair in my complete dislike of this person, and then not even giving him the benefit of the doubt that, like, this is a person who's dealing with a battle that he can't win in the public eye to a degree that none of us have any understanding of, right? Under pressure that none of us have an understanding of. So I don't actually know a lot about the interviews that he's done recently. So I'm going to interview you about them a little bit, Doug. Like, so can you tell me, like, what in particular did he say that kind of had you turn the corner a little bit?
Just the humility aspect and how he was just so open about his addiction and how it all started and um, just what it was like living in his shoes, with just all the stuff around that. And I think, he had a lot of trauma. I believe he was in like a car accident when he was young and his mom died, I think was this, or there was a car accident. His mother died. I think it was his sister in the car as well. There was two family members killed. One of them was his mom in a car accident when he was younger. And then just listening to like just him like openly talk about like everything about what he was going through and how his addiction started, how it unfolded, um, and just the nature of it, and I think that's the relatability about it, the relatability aspect. And it's because I think on the outside, it's funny, like people will have sympathy for people only with it if it's in their within their echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And the moment they're outside of what they believe politically for some reason, you throw an immense amount of shame around that what that person's doing. And I think Hunter was caught in the center of all of that. I think he was an addict, not making the best decisions, being exploited. I mean, did he commit some crimes? I mean, it seems like he did, right? He definitely was, found guilty of tax stuff, right?
Well, you have to wonder a little bit, and this is maybe me being a little bit conspiracy theory here, but you know what? Hey, who cares, right? Like the degree to which they can cover up and keep things from being made public, the ease at which this guy had his entire addiction thrown out into the public setting is like it's almost as if he wasn't used as a device of distraction, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I think like the other thing too is like if you look at where, um, you know, and you could make the argument that he only got into these places because of his family, but the guy is very well educated. It wasn't like he was like a guy who was a high school dropout and then an addict and then was like looped into business decisions.
Right.
He went to Georgetown, he went to Yale, like he's a very smart guy. I think he got his law degree from Yale, and I think that people tend to forget about that, and I learned that like from listening to his story because you know I guess I never really paid attention to politics as much as I did in the last probably I don't know 5 to 10 years or so. Um, and now it's like it's got this curve where it's like now I'm trying to pay attention less to it because it's so annoying at this point. Um, but I didn't know the full story with him. I know that there was a laptop and that he was on the board of Burisma and this company that people were saying he shouldn't have been part of, and it was only because of his dad that he was in that. And what I didn't see is the full picture, which is what I think is what he is impressive now with what he's doing. He's like, all right, the gloves are coming off. I'm telling my side of the story. And, we've talked on the show before about, what it's like being in the thick of fame as an addict. So we talked about Britney Spears. You mentioned the Matthew Perry Foundation. Matthew obviously was part of that as well. And you look at Hunter Biden, it was the same kind of thing. His dad was a career politician. You know, he had a lot of loss in his life, a lot of trauma. His brother died. His mom died. There's all this stuff that went on. And from what I understand, he was like very close friends with his brother. And all that to say, like the guy's a human being. Guy's a human being who was clearly struggling with addiction. He just celebrated, I believe, 7 years of sobriety. I saw the other day, and I've been I wouldn't say I wouldn't say I'm a fan. I mean, I want him on my pod I would love to get him on the podcast. I think his story is very fascinating. I think he was I think he was given a bad rap. I mean, again, it's not to excuse what he did or didn't do. It's more like the way he was exploited to me, I thought was very unfair. Because from what I know about being in the thick of addiction like that, like you're not doing stuff that you're you're not like thinking clearly, and you're making decisions that aren't in line with like the highest version of yourself.
You're also looking for the lever that will give you the biggest bang for your buck, and you're not really interested in how, ethical that lever is, when really what you want is to get the most for the least here. It's like, well, he had some big levers to pull, and like I said before, if I was if the roles were reversed, if it were me in that situation, I'd probably be pulling those levers. Like, I know what I was like as an addict. I know exactly who I was. I was a criminal. I was a con artist. I was all the things this dude is being is being accused of being. It's like, okay, well, would want the world to judge me and define my character and my worth and my value as a person based solely on the worst decisions I've ever made? Or would I want them to see that I'm more than just my worst decisions? And it's like, well, of course, I'd want them to see that I'm more than uh, just my worst decisions. And everyone, I think, for the majority of people, should be given that same amount of grace. But what I want to come back to is a point you brought up, which is that it's easy to root against something to the degree of it's easy to root against somebody who's not in your echo chamber. And I think I really fell victim to that with Hunter Biden. Um, Now I don't know enough about him to make a definitive decision on whether I'm pro Hunter Biden as a person or pro anti, but I think that's a weird statement in general. Make I'm like I'm anti this being. It's like I'm not against people, uh, but uh, I have to agree that like if because I wasn't a big fan of the Biden administration. And I don't mind saying that I wasn't a big fan of the Biden administration, and and so I think that him being a Biden had me, like, rooting for him to not be good, and, like, shame on me a little bit for that if to be honest, but, like, that's human nature, I think, and I don't think I gave the guy the benefit of the doubt, and I certainly don't know enough about him and his story in total to do that, but what I didn't do was I didn't ask myself this question: "If he was in my circle, would I judge him in the exact same way, or would I give him any greater benefit of the doubt?" And the answer to that question now is I would have given him a better benefit of the doubt. I absolutely would have. I know that for a fact. I would have investigated more before putting a label on it.
But, I just looked up and confirmed that in that car accident, it was him, his brother Bo, his younger sister or sister Naomi, and then the mom. The sister and the mom didn't survive.
Mm.
And so I know he's talked about like that loss there was a big thing that fueled his addiction. I think I read something he was like smoking crack like every 15 minutes at the peak of his addiction or something, which
Well,
is insane to me. It's a
yeah,
lot.
that's an extreme amount. Yeah.
And so I do think that the point is, he is a human being just like anyone else. And it's easy to kind of point the finger at people that like aren't on your team, so to speak. And I don't know why we do that. I think we've just gotten so polarized, right? That we can't have conversations with people that we don't agree with. And we can't even like the moment somebody disagrees with you, it's like that person wants to stop engaging with that conversation because they're like, you know what I mean? Like you already don't agree with me, so what's the point? When to me it's like, okay, like I don't want to debate you, but let's like have a conversation so that we can better understand each other.
Well, it's like that saying, "It's not enough to agree with me if you don't agree enough with me."
Yeah.
You that's kind of where we've gotten. Um, but I think that this really does come to the idea of, well, there's stories that we have about people, and those stories will dictate our perception of what this person should and shouldn't be capable of, right? It's like, oh, this person's the son of the president. This guy's got to have access to everything, every single, potential service to support him in his recovery. And yet here he can't get sober. It must be because he doesn't want it, or he's a loser, or whatever. It's like, there's a great saying that Doug Lyle has said to me before, because Doug Lyle, who's an evolutionary psychologist, has worked with some people who are very, very high net worth, people in Dubai that he does some psychology with. And he says, trust me, these people suffer from different problems. They're problems that you can't afford, right? And that's a reality. Just because you have more money doesn't mean that you only have the same problems with this thing that everyone else has, only you have more money to throw at it. No, you now are owning problems that this amount of money and power can afford you. And it's a completely different game.
It is. And I think that I think that people just need to stop like judging people for that stuff. I mean, I think in the near term, I think yes, if you're somebody whose addiction is causing you to like be a threat to society or you're harming yourself and other people, then yes, I think there is obviously space for a level of discernment and judgment towards what that person is doing. But I think what he's doing now is very admirable. Where I mean, I put myself in his shoes. Like, what I want people to hear my side of the story because you knew nothing about his side of the story. All you knew was you saw the laptop and you saw the photos. You saw him in the worst possible way, and you didn't see anything else outside of that. And just like like you, I don't have a problem saying like I wasn't a fan of the Biden administration either. So, in that being said, I can still look at their son, Hunter, as a human and say, I think it's really cool that he's coming out and now sharing a story. And by the way, going on podcasts of people that hated him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I
Yes.
think Candace Owens, like, had to apologize to him because she trashed him so much. I don't know about I know Sean Ryan kinda it seemed like he shared the same opinion where he was like, "You know, I really didn't wanna like you, but I do like you," you know? And, you know, Sean, if you know who he is, he doesn't sit on the same camp as the Biden family politically either. And so it's not like he went into these cakewalk interviews and was just like, "All right, I'm gonna give myself these softball interviews so that way it's easy." He went into, like, he literally went into, like, uh, the worst of the worst as far as, like, people that probably didn't like him.
Well, I think that again, there's like, everything politically in the political conversation today is you're either on my side or you're my enemy. Period. End of story. It's the way that the world seems is because most of the conversation that we're witnessing are occurring on social media, and social media is a distortion of reality. So it makes you think that everyone who disagrees with you hates you. But I guarantee you that that's how he feels. And here he is with a last name where anything he does now has to become political. And yet he's taking on this extraordinary effort of trying to share his side of the story, whether it be, helpful or hindrance to him. I don't know, but he's doing it without it trying to become, from what I can tell, trying to be not trying to become political, but just trying to like this is what actually happened for me. And I'm really interested now. I'd love to go and listen to these interviews that you mentioned and actually hear what he has to say, because at the end of the day, I'm rooting for all people to do well. I really am. I'm rooting for all people to do well, and I'm hoping that they are doing the same thing. That they're rooting for all people to do well, and what I mean by well is that to take on the burden of being the best version of yourself that you can be in the most authentic fashion that you can be, right? Because if you do that, then you're the most help to anybody if they ever need it. That's my opinion, and so that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, because I think that and how it kind of ties into, like, the theme of our show, it's like, this is reality. Like, there's gonna be I mean, depending on what happens, like, in your life, there's gonna be some wrongs you gotta right. There's gonna be time to take accountability, and I think I've seen that Hunter has taken a lot of accountability in these interviews. And let's face I mean, he's got, like I just looked, he's got, like, over 600,000 followers on Twitter, on X, and I think he's only been on for maybe a few weeks if I'm right. Um, and I think people are just drawn to the humanness of what he shared. Again, I'm not sitting here and I say that, like, I agree with, what his stance on politics or whatever. I just I look at him as somebody in recovery and somebody that's gone through a lot, and I think it's admirable that that person is taking some level of accountability after and then coming back from those moments where it's like imagine going through the worst moments of your life, the most embarrassing things, and then those images are plastered like all over the internet. I think he said in one of these interviews he was on the cover of the New York Post, like they wrote about him like more than anyone else or something like that, like in 1 year, which is insane. Like and he was just he was just like a president's like son.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness the worst things I did in my addiction were not recorded, and they're not online, and they're not plastered. It's like, I know how hard of a time I can have if I just think, for a moment that I may have embarrassed myself in some way, shape, or form, even today, and I mean, like, embarrass myself in a very mild fashion comparatively, but still, like, I have anxiety about it. Like, I couldn't imagine. I if I was struggling to get sober and watching all this stuff take place and watching the public humiliation of my face and my name all over the world, I'd be an absolute disaster. I'd be an absolute disaster.
And then how do you come back from that? How do you have the humility, right, to say, okay, like I forgive the internet, so to speak, and then the trauma and dealing with that, and then now you're going to share your story and then face more potential, backlash for talking about the very thing they trashed you for.
Well, I think that the you just answered it yourself, which is how do you come back from it? Jordan Peterson would say that the antidote to most problems in life is truth telling. It's like, well, the best thing that could if whatever happens to you as a result of telling the truth is the best thing that could possibly happen, regardless of how it looks. Right? Like if that's what he's doing, then kudos to him. Like honestly, like bravo to you if you're honestly coming out here and telling the truth and letting the chips fall where they may, because whatever happens as a result of it, that is the most real world you could live in. Is if I just was to stop lying and tell the truth. It's like, well, then then everyone, in all honesty, aside from politics, if that is what he's doing, then he deserves a round of applause.
Yeah, and I think for people who are like, well, he's lying and he's like sugarcoating stuff, it's like, all right, well, you know, I don't think it's healthy to nitpick how someone tells their story. I think what is admirable and what's important here is to look at the comeback and what he's doing, and the fact that what he's doing. Because I mean, as somebody who shared my story, a lot, I think we all have a bias in our story, right? We all do when we're telling it, right? Certain people behave differently. We maybe, didn't behave as bad as we thought. But we all have these flaws when we're telling our story to make us, to put us in the best position possible. It's not to say that we lied, but it's just part of, I think, what happens when you tell your comeback story, and the accountability aspect is you try to put yourself in a good position.
Well, I think it's also the reality of perception is that what's real for you may not be the same from the person next to you. It's like, well, hang on, you weren't that bad. It's like, yes, I was. That's what being that bad is to me.
Right.
Like, yes, I absolutely was. That's the worst I've ever been. How could that not be being really bad? Well, to them, they may have witnessed people in their lives doing much worse than that. It's like, what are you talking about? You're not that bad of a guy. So it's like, as long as you're, telling the truth and you're sharing honestly and authentically what happens. But what is a kind of a take home that this situation can be for people who are listening right now? Like what message does this send? Is it the idea that, like, again, you know, to that no matter how bad things have gotten, right, the story doesn't end, right? It's like this is just a chapter that's being written. It may be the worst chapter you've ever written in your life, and yet you still have no idea what happens in the upcoming chapters, and it's always worth investigating what's coming up, right? To just not give up.
There's a couple takeaways. I think it's the not giving up aspect. It's not being afraid to share your story, even as scary as it can be. And I think that it's also not like throwing the casting the stone into from the glass house thing where, we've all got problems. We've all got issues. We've all made mistakes we're not proud of. We all have skeletons in our closets. I think there's that. The other thing too is that I think in life, you got to give people grace. You don't have to be their best friend. You don't have to forget what happened, but there's going to be people in your life that you don't agree with that you're going to have to still find a way to give grace or have compassion for. There's going to be people in your life that you don't see eye to eye politically, and you're still going to need to have conversations with them. I mean, it doesn't make someone a bad person if they, think differently than you politically. It just means that their perception of and their worldview is different. And I think the way to improve the way we see things, just like we're having conversations now about like recovery, the way to improve that is to have conversations that cover different topics and to chat with people that think differently than you. Like you and I share common values, but we think differently. Like you think a certain way, I think a certain way. I mean, it's just the way it is.
I mean, what a great way to wrap it up is everyone deserves grace. Right? You may not agree with them. They may not agree with you, but they still deserve grace. They still you should still give them the opportunity to be heard, because, and this is what I think, in giving someone the opportunity to be heard, you have the opportunity to share why you don't agree with it and whether or not disagreeing is valuable.
And
That's the only way that happens.
here's the last banger I'll leave people with. If you can't forgive somebody on the internet for what they did, how the heck are you going to forgive yourself?
Oof.
Like that's the easiest thing is to like let go of what somebody on the internet you don't even know like did. Like if you can't do that, like how are you going to forgive like your partner? How are you going to forgive yourself? How are you going to forgive a sibling?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if it takes up that much of your life,
Yeah.
It's just like all you can think about, all you can talk about is how upset you are at the this and that and the political situation here or the business situation here or what this, bot said. It's like, what are you running from?
Hunter Biden, come on the podcast if you're listening to this in our recovery sphere. But Adam, this was a great episode. Lots of takeaways. I really love that we did this.
Yeah, me too, man. Really good one. All right, everyone. If you have any suggestions, we have a few guests that are coming up that we're getting ready. Funny enough, we were talking about the Matthew Perry Foundation. The head of the Matthew Perry Foundation is going to be an upcoming guest. And we also have doctors Dean and Aisha Sherzai, who are the world's leading authority on cognitive health, on cognitive longevity. And so we're gonna do an in-depth conversation with them on what is your brain on drugs, and then what happens to you afterwards, and what levers you can pull to recover, repair, and potentially reverse any damage. That's going to be a really interesting one. I really want people to, that's the next one that we're going to be recording. We're recording that one next week. Should be really exciting. Really
Exciting stuff. Exciting stuff, bro. Well, yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in and a comment with either a takeaway or a guest or topic you want to see on the show.
peace.